Hi, this is the Jay Show, and this is Dr. Jay Smith. It's good to have you with us. I have a special new guest with me, Sarah Foster.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, listen, thank you for coming. This is going to be exciting. We're going to be doing some new material. In fact, what I thought we would do, Sarah, is have you help me unpack really the basis of how Muslims think and how they act. What they act means the deen of Islam. These are the practices. And how many are there?
So there's 5 practices in Islam.
Let's just name them real quickly. What's the first one?
So you would have the Shahadah, that's the statement of faith.
The statement of faith, okay.
That's what every Muslim would say.
And in the Arabic it's a Shahadah.
Shahadah.
Okay, and so when would you, we'll unpack that as we get to it. The second one will be the prayers.
The second one's the prayers, the salat.
The salat, okay, and that's what they do 5 times a day.
Yeah, well, we're going to look at that, Jay. We're going to see how that develops.
You're going to see that it's not actually 5 prayers in the Quran. So we're going to unpack that and show there's some problems with that. And the third one would be what would be what? The fast, the Sawm.
The Sawm.
So that's the what they do during the Ramadan. We know it as Ramadan fast, but we also, the word is Sawm, S-A-W-M, and we're going to unpack that and find out where that came from and how they do it and some of the peculiarities surrounding it. And then what's the fourth one?
Would be tithing, wouldn't it?
The tithing. That's the zakat.
The zakat.
And that's what they pay. And we're going to show that there are some differences between that and what we have in Christianity. And then the fifth one is what?
It's Hajj. It's the pilgrimage.
Once in your lifetime. Okay, let's start with the very first one. Deen are the practices. These are practices that every Muslim must do.
This is what we're told.
Not all of them, except all 5, and there's some that put a 6th on, which would be jihad. So let's start with the Shahadah. And the Shahadah starts with La ilaha illallah, which is there is
no
one
God
but God, Allah. There is no God but Allah. And you will find this, interestingly, in Surah 2, Ayah 255, Surah 28, Ayah 88, and Surah 112, Ayah 1 to 4.
But Jay, when I talk to my Muslim friends, if I just said that first part of the Shahadah, I wouldn't. I'm a Christian. But if I did, it wouldn't make me a Muslim. There's a second part that's very important.
And what's the second part?
You have to affirm that there is no prophet except Muhammad.
Well, Muhammadur Rasulullah. So you have to have the two side, right one follows the other.
Yeah.
There's no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet.
His prophet.
But you will not find that in the Quran, the two together.
No, you will not find there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. They're quite separate.
And we're going to actually unpack this and we're going to actually ask some very disturbing questions, because even the name Muhammad is found only 4 times in the entire Quran.
Yes.
So where is this idea that there is one God and Muhammad is his prophet? When was that really first introduced?
Well, it's quite sad, actually. It seems like it's many years later, 691 on the Dome of the Rock.
Dome of the Rock is the first. It's introduced on the coins.
On the coins as well.
Put out by Abdul Malik in 692. It's also introduced on the Caliphal Protocols, again by Abdul Malik. It is Abdul Malik that actually introduced that there is no God but God and Muhammad is his prophet. So Muhammad died when?
632. This is why it's very disturbing, because we have the Quran, which is meant to be Allah's direct speech. And if Allah wanted people who are going to become Muslims to say a particular statement to affirm their faith, I'm sure Allah would have put it in the Quran, but we don't find it.
And even this book, as we're going to find out as we move and unpack some of the historical problems with the Quran, we'll do that later on. But even in this book, as we're looking for the Shahadah, don't waste your time. And as we're going to find out with the prayers, we're going to find even the 5 prayers. You have to go back as far back as the 9th century to find those 5 prayers, because you're not going to find the 5 prayers in here. But that's for another talk and later on. So let's unpack this. This is the statement you say when you're converted. This is the statement you say before you go into Mecca to do the Hajj. This is the statement that delineates whether you are a Muslim or not, and that's why you don't like to say it, right?
Yeah, well, it is very interesting. It seems that Islam really is all about Muhammad, his life, what he did, what he said. He says that he received a revelation. And if you just contrast it with the Bible, if you contrast it with Christianity, Judaism, there are many prophets there, and it centers on the Messiah. It centers on God coming down in the form of Jesus Christ. And we focus only on God. But in Islam, it's all about this man. Muhammad is the one who is the intercessor. Muhammad is the one who is the warner. Everything revolves around Muhammad.
So he really is the one that takes on the mantle, much of the mantle that we know that Jesus takes on.
Yeah.
Surah 4, Ayah 171, on the Dome of the Rock again, answers that question.
Yeah.
And it says, for there are not three, say not three, for God is one. And Muhammad is his prophet. So there you see, it's attacking Jesus, introducing Muhammad. It's attacking our God who takes on human form. And it's actually a confrontation against everything we believe. Yes. So in some ways, the Shahadah is just that. It's not just a statement of faith for Muslims to take on, to rally around. It's also a confrontation. It's a polemic against Christianity, is it not?
It is, completely.
Almost elevating Muhammad to the status that we elevate Jesus. Don't say that to a Muslim, they get very upset. But you're bringing this up, that the function of Muhammad in the Shahadah takes on such a bigger form as you move out and look and see how he is. If you look here, he has a messianic role in Surah 4, Ayah 59. In Surah 5, Ayah 58. He has intercessory role as a judge in Surah 24, Ayah 51. He is the messenger of mercy, the Al-Amin, in Surah 21, Ayah 107. He is a recipient of the Quran. Look at all these different functions on this one man, many of which have already previously been the functions of Jesus Christ. So there is a glaring omission, isn't there, Sarah, as we've intimated already previously. And the glaring omission is the name itself.
Muhammad.
That's right. I mean, it does talk about the prophet who does this and does that and does all these different functions, but it always forgets to name him, or intentionally does not name him, or intimates that there is a prophet who is unnamed, suggesting that maybe they don't know yet who this prophet is.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, we find in the Quran, I think it's in Surah 7, 147, where it says, you'll find him, and it talks about his name, Ahmed, in the Torah and in the Injil. Where Ahmed, Muhammad, who are we talking about here?
Well,
is Ahmed Muhammad?
Well, they would say it's a diminutive of Muhammad.
Okay, so can we say in
the glorious one?
Can we say in the Shahada there's no God but Allah and Ahmed is his prophet?
No, you can't.
Why not, Jay?
You can't interchange it. Now, that's a good question to ask the Muslim. Let me just give you the references where these 4 times that you'll find his name. In Surah 3, Ayah 144, in Surah 33, Ayah 40, in Surah 47, Ayah 2, and in Surah 48, Ayah 29. That's it. Those are the only times you're going to find the name of Muhammad. Every other time, it is this prophet who lives at that place, who does this thing and that thing and the other, but it's very ambiguous.
It is.
Opaque. You don't know who this character is. All you know that he is a representative. He does take on a messianic role. He does do an intercessory function. All these things that you did say. But why don't they name him? See, in the Bible, all the way through, we know exactly who we're talking about. Jesus is named over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
And it's obvious that Jesus takes on that role. It's Jesus who's the Son of God. It's Jesus who's the Messiah. It's Jesus who's the Word of God, the Lamb of God, and all the other terms.
Those are titles, Jays, aren't they? They're titles. Lamb
Always
of God,
pointing
Rose
to,
of Sharon.
That's right.
These are titles. But when we're talking about Muhammad and Ahmed, these are changes of names. What's Muhammad's title? Maybe messenger,
representative. That's about it. And he does say more and more. Why do you even, when he asks, when they ask, how do you prove that you do a miracle to prove you're a prophet? He says, why should I do a prophet? I'm nothing more than a warner.
Isn't that interesting?
That's not much of a defense.
Isn't that interesting? With Jesus, we know that he's a prophet. Well, the people knew that he was a prophet, as well as even more things, because he did all these miracles.
And they picked up stones to stone him when he dared to take on divine titles.
They saw his miracles as signs, as ayahs.
Yeah.
And Muhammad says he doesn't have any. So how is it that Muhammad gets into the statement of faith?
That we have to put at the feet of Abdul Malik. And I would suggest, as we're going to find out in future talks, that was the need. The need was there to create a Arabic prophet with an Arab Quran for the Arab people in the Arab language.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head, Jay, because why not just simply stop at, there is no God but Allah?
That's right.
Because that's what we should affirm. There's only one God. We affirm that as Christians. We believe in one God. We believe one God, 3 persons.
Yeah.
That's all you need to believe in. You believe in God.
Well,
why on earth do you put a man
it's
in the
political,
statements of
isn't
faith?
it? It all
seems
comes
so.
to a political necessity to create an identity, an Arab identity, which is in distinction to the Byzantine Christian identity.
Yes.
Notice they don't attack the Sassanids over in the east,
No, they don't.
who they've also subjugated and dominated. There's nothing about anything that's Sassanid. It is all an attack against the person of Jesus Christ, the Byzantine world. It's a political statement. This is a political statement. The Shahadah was created by Abd al-Malik as a political statement that said there's only one God, not three. Say not three, God is
Yes,
one.
yes.
So there's the attack against the Trinity. And his prophet is Muhammad, and it's not Jesus anymore.
Well, we know that
Muhammad is Arab.
Yes.
This is an Arab identity. It's an Arab prophet, and it's an Arab God because the name is Allah, not Yahweh. So we're going to get to that later
Yeah,
on.
I mean-
this is why it's fascinating when you unpack it. It is a political statement. This is,
Allah in the Quran says that he has sent it down in Arabic so that you may have a revelation. So
Yeah.
it's definitely for the Arabs.
and only the Arabs. And we make that point all the time in Speaker's Corner.
You do.
We say, okay, if you're going to tell me that I can only read this in Arabic, then this is not for me.
Allah himself said it.
See, my God is for everybody.
There we go.
And the God of the Bible, you can come to him in any language.
Any language whatsoever.
Any language. My God can understand you in every language, but it looks like the Arab God, this Allah, can only understand you in one language.
It's amazing, Jay. I mean, in the Bible, we have Aramaic, we have Hebrew, we have Greek. We have them speaking to different people in different cultures. God is speaking, the prophets are speaking. It doesn't matter. God is a God. The God of the Bible is a God for everyone.
And I do this all the time, and you've seen me do it, haven't you? When Muslims say, do not read that in English, because I have it always in Arabic and English. For those who, if you do ever get into a discussion with a Muslim, make sure your Quran is both in Arabic and in English,
Yes.
or whatever language you use, and in English. Because you'll be reading the English, but that is not the Quran. In fact, it says here, the interpretation of the meaning of the Noble Quran, that is not even a translation. They don't believe that the Quran can be translated. It has to be in Arabic.
Yeah.
And I love to run with that. I say, that's fascinating. So if you're telling me I have to read it in Arabic, then your God can only speak one language.
Yeah, yeah. And we're having a bit of fun here, but I think the important point is that we read it to understand. We read it to see how God has revealed himself. God is actually trying to communicate. And if we're reading it in a language, or we're just reciting in a language you don't actually understand, then how does that help our faith? How does that help us to live?
Oh, I'm not having fun. I think this is actually quite serious.
Yeah, it's very serious.
If God can only speak one language, that means he's only a God for one people, and he's not a God for me, nor a God for you. And even not a God for the Muslims, because 85% of Muslims don't speak Arabic.
There you go.
So if you're saying that you can only understand him in one language, then I would like to ask Muslims, how in the world do they have a God that can only speak one language? They need a bigger God, don't they? And the Shahadah should be something that's much bigger than just one man, one language, and one God.
Yes, it has to be recited in Arabic. Why?
Well, because evidently Allah can only speak that language. Now, we're going to get that, and we're going to unpack that as we do. But let's just talk about these converts. They don't call them converts. When someone does the Shahadah, when they come to Islam, what do they call them? They don't call them converts.
They call them reverts.
And why do they do that, Sarah?
And they say that before you were physically born, you were a Muslim.
Everybody was a Muslim.
Everybody was a Muslim. Everybody prostrated.
So you were usurped, or as you grew up, because of the family you're in, because of the environment you're in,
Yes,
because
it's
the
your
culture you're in,
parents or your culture that's
it pulled you away
made you
from
a
Islam.
polytheist or a Christian. This is
Made
what
you a
the Quran
polytheist, okay,
says.
or pagan or kafir. So when you do the Shahadah, you're reverting back, is what they're saying. And so we have quite a few reverts here in London, and they're very proud of the fact that they're reverts, not converts.
Yeah.
And we don't ever say that. We know that we are born. When we're born into sin. That's we know that Adam and Eve, that's the imputation of the original sin. We talk about the original sin all the time, and we've mentioned this, haven't we?
Yeah.
That original sin was imputed on all of humanity, and even our environment. The fact that you have childbirth pain, the fact that there are thorns, thistles, all this that has impinged on our environment. The fact that we can no longer walk and talk in the cool of the day with God.
And even if we back up a little bit, when God created us, when God created man, he made it good. He made us good. And something happened, which we also see a kind of reflection of in the Quran, with Adam and Eve in the Bible, Adam and Hawa. We see something happened that changed the course of humanity. We call it sin in the Bible, and God takes it very, very seriously.
And so we know that all of us, everybody, everybody is sinful.
Well, I mean, you can just look at all your friends, anybody you know. Is there anybody who you know is absolutely perfect,
No,
has not
no,
done anything
no,
wrong?
no.
I mean, life testifies to the fact that everybody is a sinner before God, because God is perfect and we're less than. That's really what we mean.
We haven't really done a lot of this on the Jay's show, but certainly we will be doing a lot of it when we get to the hermeneutical key. Beth and I are going to do that, and we're going to show that in the hermeneutical key, the whole idea of attaining salvation in Christianity is absolutely impossible. We can't do it.
Yeah,
there's not a thing we can do. So how does Islam attain this Shahadah? How do they come back? How is it that they get this Shahadah? How do they attain salvation?
Well, this is a very good question. I mean, there's different places in the Quran that talk about different things. Doing the practices is very, very important. So doing your prayers, not missing your prayers, there's different doors into salvation.
And that's through human effort.
It's through human effort.
Now let me just reference the different surahs that talk about that. You'll find that in Surah 2, Ayah 25, also verse 82. 85. In Surah 4, Ayah 57, verse 122 to 124. In Surah 10, verse 9, Surah 11, verse 11, verse 23 and verse 52, Surah 18, verse 30 to 31, and also 1 to 7. So you have reference after reference after reference that says that the way to eradicate your sin, the way to salvation is through your own work.
Yeah.
What are some of the things they do for their work?
Well, the praying would be very important.
We're going to be doing that. This is what we're talking about, isn't it? In fact, the very things that are in the deen are the way to earn your salvation.
That's right.
To do the 5 prayers.
You do the 5 prayers, you would have done the Shahadah, you make sure you pay your zakat. The Hajj would absolve you from all your sins. The Ramadan
fast every year.
Yes.
That is, and as we know that when you're born, a Muslim says this, for Muslims when they're born, an angel is placed on your right shoulder, another angel is placed on your left shoulder.
Yes.
What does this angel do? This angel records your good deeds. And the ones on your left shoulder?
Recording your bad deeds.
Like a bank account.
Worse than that, Satan touches you when you're born.
Right.
Every single person, except for 2 or 1, depending which hadith you read.
Okay, and so what happens when? How does that impinge on your life?
Well, it's very interesting. If Satan is touching you, it shows you that you're impure, unclean. We'd call it sinful.
Well, that's original sin, isn't it?
I would say so. It's very interesting that the only person in a number of hadiths who is not touched by Satan is Isa, Jesus.
And he's the righteous one in Surah 19, Ayah 19. 19
says he's the pure one. He's the one who has not been touched by Satan. In some other hadiths it says Mary too. But we just find that very interesting. So when we're looking at salvation, how you gain it, there's one person that didn't need forgiveness of sins because he had not sinned. Mm-hmm. And that was Jesus. But the rest of us need to do, according to Islamic theology, need to do all these 5 prayers.
And it's interesting that it's a very easy way to earn salvation. God just forgives you. There's no penalty other than asking for it, and God does it. Now, there's some verses that support that. Let me just read them to you. One is Surah 4, Ayah 10. And whoever does evil or wrongs himself, but afterwards God seeks God's forgiveness, he will find God oft forgiving, most merciful.
Yeah.
Oft forgiving, most merciful. The God who is the compassionate one, the merciful one. Al-Rahman, Al-Rahim. 25 times you will see this repeated. Well, and they remind us that's all God needs to do.
Well, this is the contradiction, you see. You have some times where it says it's all through your human effort, and other times where it says Allah has to forgive you. Muhammad himself didn't know what was going to happen to him. And so there is a confusion with regard to how you do obtain your salvation. We're going to move on to jihad a little bit later, where it talks about a definite way you can get salvation if you die in the way of jihad. But in terms of salvation, yes, you must do your 5 prayers and the other practices. But it may be that Allah forgives you, it may be that He doesn't forgive you. Allah, who's the example for all mankind according to the Quran, didn't know whether He was going to be forgiven Himself.
So Surah 11, Ayah 52 says much the same thing. So does Surah 39, Ayah 53. That all you need to do is work off. I want to get back to one thing you just mentioned. Muhammad didn't know. Wait a minute. Muhammad did not know whether or not he was going to be saved?
This is such an interesting contrast. So Muhammad says...
Of all people...
Yeah. I'm but a warner, he says. I don't know what will be done with me.
Okay, let me read it. Surah 46, Ayah 9. Say, I am not something original among the messengers, nor do I know what will be done with me or with you. I only follow that which is revealed to me. and I am not but a clear warner. That's very clear. He didn't know what's going to happen to him.
Not just to him, but to you as well. Whoever's following him, to his followers, he did not know. Sorry, he didn't know what was going to happen to them.
Now, you just said earlier that he's the intercessor. How can he take on those functions if he doesn't even know what his future is?
Well, that's a question to ask our Muslim friends. How can you follow someone who doesn't know where they're going, doesn't know where you will go if you follow them? And it's in such stark contrast to what we see in the Bible with regard to what Jesus said.
You know, Sarah, I have a friend from Burkina Faso.
Yes.
And he and others on our team know him. And he was a son of an imam in Burkina Faso. And he asked his father once, if everybody is gaining their good deeds written on this record here, and their bad deeds written on this record here, and then when you die, your records are taken by the two angels and put on a scale, and hopefully your good deeds over here outweigh your bad deeds up here. And then, only then, are you then allowed to go across the razor-sharp bridge called the Sirat.
Yeah.
You're walking across that down below, which is hell.
We find that in the Hadith.
That's right. But Allah can throw you down at any time as you're walking across. So that's why Muhammad had to say, I don't know whether I'm going to make it. I don't know where I'm going to go. And he was thinking about that one day. And as he was thinking about this, he said, well, wait a minute, Daddy. He went to his father. He says, Daddy, what happens if they're actually equal when you die? Then where do you go? His father said, don't you ever ask me that question again. And it's because of that he left Islam. He is now a Christian. He is a missionary back in Burkina Faso.
So when you say his dad said, never ask me that question again.
Because he didn't know how to answer it.
He didn't have an answer.
He didn't have an answer. He says, this is one of those things you don't ask about. And this is what tends to happen whenever it's man-made. Whenever you have a theology that's man-made, as Islam is. In fact, stop and think, Sarah, almost everything you know about animistic traditions.
Yes.
Every animistic tradition, they all start with this premise that you have good deeds, bad deeds. And you're always, one is warring against the other. And you're always trying to make sure that the good deeds outdo the bad deeds. Get the exact same paradigm. Nothing new under the sun. Islam is not original in anything. It's just borrowed what has already been. African traditional religions, that's what I think, ATRs.
Yeah.
African traditional religions have always summed that up, have always assumed that. Islam comes along and just takes what's already there.
I've asked many of my Muslim friends over and over again, can you show me one thing that Muhammad brought that I need to follow? One new thing, a good thing that Muhammad brought that I need to follow for my salvation?
This has been a question I've always had.
I don't see it. Jesus has already said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Those who come to, he talks about him being the bread of life. If we follow him, if we go to him, we won't be thirsty again. We won't be hungry again. He knows the way to heaven.
Right.
Because he came from heaven.
Muslims do have good luck sayings, though. They have these things to help them. In Senegal, we used to have these giddy-giddies on our arms. You were in Gambia, you saw that. They put these giddy-giddies amulets with Quranic verses. They put them around their waist, they put them around their chest. And they're always buying them from the Marabu, who's making a mint off of some of these giddy-giddies for every occasion.
Yeah.
And these giddy-giddies are there to placate and to eradicate the bad deeds, to give them good deeds. It's almost like a magical potion. And these potions are Quranic verses. My friends in West Africa always assumed that they worked. This shows you what kind of neighbors we had. Our next door neighbors were actually brigands, dacoits. These were guys that would smuggle things across the border into Gambia and further. And of course, whenever they were smuggling, they'd be looking for police. And whenever they saw police coming, they would push up their giddy-giddies to make themselves invisible.
Did it work?
Well, the problem was, and they always got caught, and I always, well, what happened to giddy-giddies? And they said, well, actually, the problem was the police also had giddy-giddies that made us visible again. So there's always an excuse.
Yeah.
One of my friends was a wrestler, one of these big, brawny wrestlers. And I would go to his wrestling matches, and he had giddy-giddies and all across his chest. And I'd go to him, and I'd say, okay, now, if you win, who has won? Have you won or have the giddy-giddies won? And he says, I win. And I said, okay, if you lose, who has lost? You or the giddy? The giddy-giddies lose. So he would always blame the giddy-giddies, these amulets, for losing the wrestling match, but he would take the credit for winning. Fascinating how even that, he was smiling at he said, of course, because he knew that he dare not mock it. But still, you can see there is a belief. If you have this good versus the bad, that's And in the whole idea, you do the Shahadah before the match, you do the Shahadah after. They would bring the Shahadah in all the way, almost like an incantation. And it became a magical incantation, trying to use anything to help them get away from the police or to help them win the wrestling match. We don't need the Bismillah al-Rahman al-Rahim.
No.
This is the beautiful thing about Jesus Christ. The gospel teaches that there's a much better alternative. We don't have to have fear about the evil spirits.
It says, at the name of Jesus, the demons will flee.
We know that there's no other way to salvation. It does not do through good works. We know that our works are as filthy rags.
Yes.
It was very clear that Adam and Eve, all they did was one sin.
One.
And that threw them out of God's presence. We're doing sins all day long.
Because he's perfect. He doesn't tolerate it.
He cannot.
He cannot just forgive. There's a process. There's a way. There's this very specific way that he taught the Jews. And there's a very specific way that Jesus came to fulfill that which he taught in the Old Testament, in the Jewish Bible.
And sin cannot just be eradicated.
No.
There's no way we could get in the presence of a holy God, so holy that he cannot even look upon one sin. Habakkuk 1, chapter 1, verse 13. That's how holy God is. If God is that holy, there's no way in the world that we can be in his presence.
So that's why I have a problem with Allah in Islam, how he just forgives sins.
There is no way that he can.
So
unless, of course, they're never in his presence.
Well, that's it. Say if somebody comes and kills your brother or your sister, Allah just forgives. There's no punishment. There's no reckoning of what's been lost.
Yeah.
In Christianity, God deals with the sin.
The whole idea of original sin is very much there in both Christianity and Islam. The Garden of Eden is up in space, and there is Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Now they're thrown down to earth in verse 24 of chapter 7. Why aren't we up in space? The fact that we're all down here suggests very clearly that all of us are imputed with Adam and Eve's sin in the Quran as well. And the Shahadah is brought in as a means to placate, as a means to introduce you to Islam, as a means to get into the holy city, as a means, as the first thing they do when a child is born. This Bismillah al-Rahman al-Rahim is almost like a magical potion. The giddy-giddies that are made as magical, you might say, powers to protect you. All of these are done to try to eradicate the evil spirits that exist, these evil spirits that seemingly are all over the place, but that the Quran doesn't help you with, that Islam doesn't help you with.
And Muhammad doesn't help you with either. I mean, there's a hadith where Muhammad's trying to pray and a jinn is distracting him from prayer. Now, what do you think Muhammad does?
Well, tell me.
Well, he gets up and he tries to strangle this jinn. How is that going to...
I should laugh.
I know, but how...
It is almost folktale-ish, isn't it?
How is that going to help you when you're praying and the same thing happens to you? You're going to have to wait and call Muhammad to come and strangle this jinn?
That's right.
And this is just completely different to the way the prophets operated in the Jewish Bible, in the Christian Bible. Completely different. We call on God. God is the one who deals with these things.
You know, we would go and visit people at nighttime when all the spirits are out walking purposely, and the people would be so shocked as we walked into their courtyard. How did you get here? And we said, we just walk wherever we want because we have a greater spirit. His name is Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, to protect us. The Holy Spirit who walks along with us.
Yeah,
and that would be a great introduction into the need. The fact is, you don't need these giddy-giddies. No. You don't need the Shahadah.
No.
You don't need these incantations.
No.
You don't need these seeming magical words.
No.
You've got the Holy Spirit to protect us.
Yeah, we've got God.
Yeah.
We've got God.
I hope those who are listening see there's quite a contrast. The Shahadah is a statement of faith that Muslims have to have. They need it to protect themselves. You can see it doesn't exist in its entirety in the Quran itself. It was introduced by Abdul Malik 60 years after Muhammad died. We're going to see that in our historical talks. There are some real problems with it because it implies that there is a need for something beyond God to placate and to eradicate the sin that is there. But the whole definition of sin is not the way we would see it in the Bible. We will be talking more about that later. It's been great to have you. Stay with us as we then go into the second deen, or the second practice, which will be prayer. We will go into prayer in the next segment. This is Jay then here in London. Over and out.